In a village where laziness was legendary, Anka, a stunning yet idle woman, reigned as the queen of indolence, shirking all chores and motherhood with a defiant smirk. Her exasperated husband, Uber, took a second wife, Amara, whose diligence starkly contrasted Anka's apathy, keeping their home alive with effort and care. Anka's refusal to lift a finger led to a fateful encounter when she sent the pregnant Amara to wash her neglected clothes, sparking a chain of events involving a mysterious old woman and a pouch of dazzling diamonds. Anka's greed drove her to a shocking act of violence, unleashing a curse that turned her tears into vanishing gems and her body into a furnace of pain. As the village buzzed with whispers of her deeds, Anka faced a grueling punishment, washing widows' clothes while desperately seeking redemption. Would her hardened heart soften through acts of kindness, or would her avarice seal her fate forever? Dive into this gripping tale of laziness, betrayal, and the transformative power of compassion. Long ago, there was a highly indolent woman who, in spite of her attractiveness and clever wit, was well known throughout the village for her laziness. Her name was Anka, and besides being lazy, she was as obstinate as a sealed lock, never tidying up, laundering, preparing meals, or consenting to bear a child for her spouse. She thought kids were a hassle and household tasks were for idiots. Due to exasperation, she urged her husband, Uber, to take a second spouse who could provide him with offspring and manage the household duties she shunned. The second wife, Amara, was the complete opposite of Anka, diligent, prolific, and courteous. However, even with Amara in the home, Anka declined to do any work. Approaching 40, she would pass her days lounging in bed, coloring her nails, and consuming the meals Amara had made. She never collected water, never visited the fields, and never accompanied the other ladies to the nighttime market. All Anka did was invent fresh justifications for her inactivity, each more absurd than the previous, and the villagers, who had become weary of her behavior, started referring to her as the monarch of indolence. Anka had mastered the skill of idleness. If Uber grumbled, she would dismiss him with a sluggish grin and remark, "Darling, this allure you appreciate doesn't sustain itself. Relaxation is included in my duties." Amara, conversely, was a storm of productivity, preparing food, tidying, laundering garments, and caring for her kids cheerfully. Villagers murmured that without Amara, Uber would have expelled Anka ages ago. But Anka stayed indifferent. She preferred her existence as it existed, devoid of pressure and obligations. The azure containers in the backyard's nook vividly illustrated her tale. They brimmed with her soiled garments that hadn't encountered water for months. Insects hummed above the heap like tiny magistrates delivering verdicts. Still, Anka declined to handle them. She asserted that laundering caused her migraines. Therefore, one dawn, she summoned Amara and commanded her to launder every garment. Amara was 7 months expectant, but Anka was unconcerned. She positioned herself like a tyrant while indicating the filthy clothes, her fingernails clicking on the surface as she notified Amara that she desired the garments cleaned prior to midday. Amara glanced at her puffy ankles, then at the heap of laundry. The midwife cautioned me against excessive labor, but Anka dismissed it with an eye roll. Being pregnant isn't an illness. Didn't our forebears cultivate, gather water, and mash yams while pregnant? Cease chatting and commence laundering. Without alternatives, Amara transported the weighty containers to the brook. But while she immersed the initial group of garments, an odd event occurred. An elderly lady neared her and noticed a shawl amid the stack. She lifted the shawl, grinning, while handing Amara a tiny sack, stating that her intuition guided her to deliver the sack to Amara upon spotting the shawl. Amara declined the sack, but the elderly lady persisted, affirming she intended no malice. With no alternative, Amara accepted the sack from the lady, expressing gratitude for her generosity. She grasped the sack in her palms, assuming it contained merely regular coins or petty cash. Thus, she placed it aside while completing the laundering of the remaining garments. Upon returning home several hours afterward, inquisitiveness overcame her. Amara loosened the hide cord encircling the sack and emptied the items into her palm. Her jaw dropped, and she gazed at the gems in her grasp. They were incredibly radiant, and Amara couldn't suppress her thrill. The gems were dissimilar to anything she had previously encountered. Amara, as an impoverished orphan, had never possessed such riches in her whole existence. She pranced about the yard, summoning her spouse to view what an unknown person had bestowed upon her. "The Lord has recalled me," she exclaimed, raising the gems aloft while her spouse celebrated alongside her. Quickly, the information disseminated rapidly as females congregated, muttering in wonder to behold gems for the initial occasion. When Anka learned the tale of how the lady presented Amara the gems due to her shawl, her expression stiffened. She marched directly to Amara and requested the gems. "Hand them over," she declared, disclosing that the elderly lady solely provided the gems because of her shawl. "Had I not dispatched you to launder my soiled garments, the elderly lady wouldn't have spotted my shawl and bestowed the gems upon you. Therefore, the gems belong to me," she asserted irately while attempting to seize the gems from Amara. But Amara gripped the gems firmly, maintaining that destiny had delivered them to her. Anka was extremely enraged. Her gaze constricted as she advanced nearer, her tone keen enough to slice as she started to talk. "Amara, avoid being silly. Those gems were intended for me. Without my shawl in that stack, that elderly lady would have strolled past you. You're merely grasping what is legitimately mine." But Amara's digits clenched the sack until her joints paled. "No," she asserted resolutely. "You assign me to launder from laziness, not benevolence. I trudged beneath the scorching sunlight with my inflamed ankles, and these presents arrived in my possession. The lady didn't inquire about you. She presented them to me. Widow in the village, until the elderly lady she attempted to murder appears and pardons her." Anka lacked alternatives but to comply as directed. The village widows were instructed to deliver their soiled garments to her. Each dawn, Anka followed the villagers' orders. She devoted her days at the brook laundering garments amid suffering as her form scorched and her eyes shed gems that vanished upon dropping from her eyes. Each day was anguish as Anka beseeched to encounter the elderly lady once more. But weeks elapsed, and the elderly lady remained absent. She expressed regret to her fellow spouse, Amara, and expressed gratitude for defending her. Anka searched everywhere for the elderly lady, who appeared to have vanished from the village. Daily as she laundered by the brook, she beseeched to see the elderly lady again, but her pleas went unanswered. One dusk, while laundering the garments in agony, an elderly gentleman neared her and begged for her assistance. He desired her to collect water from the brook. "My dwelling isn't distant," he told Anka, whom he implored to assist in transporting the water home. Anka was in immense agony. The heavens had darkened as precipitation was imminent. Anka considered the duration it would consume to aid the gentleman. She still possessed numerous garments to launder and was uncertain. Nonetheless, an inner voice prompted her to assist him. Thus, she collected the water for him and accompanied him to his dwelling, which she discovered was far in the woods. Anka couldn't comprehend how such a gentleman chose to reside solitarily in the woods. En route, torrential rain commenced, and Anka rushed with the gentleman as they reached his modest shelter. Upon arrival, the elderly gentleman expressed gratitude for her aid. He requested her to remain in his shelter until the precipitation ceased, and Anka consented, observing the rain's intensity. She sat in the shelter awaiting the rain's end. The elderly gentleman expressed thanks for her benevolence. Nonetheless, he couldn't overlook the sorrow in her gaze. He positioned himself opposite her and inquired about the issue, and Anka recounted the entire tale to him. The elderly gentleman encouraged her to persist, since wonders occur more swiftly than imaginable. Those statements instilled her with bravery as she awaited the rain's cessation. Shortly after, she went back to the brook to complete her laundering. She arrived home that dusk and found Amara suffering. She was delivering, and their spouse remained absent. Quickly, Anka transported Amara to the midwife's shelter. They had recently completed a birth, as Anka observed them escort Amara into the shelter for her delivery. She positioned herself in the nook as a youthful lady neared her requesting aid. "My sibling has just delivered, and we lack funds to settle," the youthful lady told Anka, who requested her to pause while she went home for funds. Anka couldn't believe her heart's transformation. She had perpetually been avaricious, but the recent occurrences had shown her greed's consequences. She reached home and encountered her spouse, whom she informed about Amara's ongoing delivery. Anka seized some funds as they both hastened to the midwife's shelter. Upon arrival, she encountered the youthful lady who had delivered and inquired about her sibling, and the lady regarded her puzzled. "I lack a sibling," she told Anka, who remained astonished pondering the events. At that instant, Anka heard the village announcer declare her liberation from retribution. The agony throughout her form vanished, and the gems cascading from her eyes ceased. Anka remained in astonished quiet, incapable of comprehending the occurrence. The youthful lady who requested aid was absent, and the sibling she mentioned was unaware of her. What Anka was unaware of was that the elderly lady she sought had masked herself as both the elderly gentleman in the woods and the youthful woman who recently requested aid. The masks had served as an examination, an assessment of her soul, an evaluation of her endurance, her readiness to display benevolence without anticipating compensation. Her retribution was removed, not due to sufficient suffering, but because she ultimately selected empathy over avarice. Anka collapsed to her knees on the earthen path outside the healer's shelter as tears streamed down her face. For the initial occasion in months, there was no scorching, no evaporating gems, merely the comfort of respite and the subtle ache of modesty. From that day onward, Anka laundered not solely the widow's garments. She commenced performing every task in their home as she prepared meals and also cared for her infant child. Anka, following all this, ultimately consented to bear her own offspring, and though the elderly lady never reemerged, Anka conducted her life as if she could return any time, prepared this occasion to succeed the examination without delay. The moral from this tale is that benevolence without anticipation is the most genuine type of riches. An idle hand might evade labor temporarily, but the moment invariably arrives when the soul undergoes examination, and solely those selecting empathy will succeed. Always recall that good fortunes may appear in various masks, and the tiniest gesture of aid could unlock liberation from existence's heaviest loads. I trust you relish the tale. Willingly. Their tones escalated, resounding across the yard until locals started assembling. Murmurs commenced threading through the assembly. Some supported Anka, asserting that it was truly her shawl that attracted the elderly lady's notice. Others disapproved, noting that good fortunes accompany those who toil, not those who recline in bed, decorating their nails. Uber, attracted by the commotion, entered the center. He examined the gems, then the pair of ladies. "The fact is straightforward," he stated. "Destiny compensates the diligent hands. Anka, had you laundered your own garments, perhaps the elderly lady would have presented the gift to you personally, but you didn't. And the good fortune transferred to the one who toiled." The assembly whispered their concurrence as Anka's countenance reddened with embarrassment. She retreated to her chamber enraged, resolved to acquire her own gems no matter what. The following dawn, Anka gathered all her garments for the brook. She positioned the shawl atop the laundry stack as she perched on a stone, awaiting the elderly lady's arrival with patience. Several hours afterward, a youthful girl neared her to request assistance. "My dad is ill in the wilderness," the small girl stated as she implored Anka to aid her ailing father, who had recently collapsed in the nearby wilderness. But Anka inspected her from top to bottom and sneered. "Seek someone else. I'm anticipating an important person," she remarked, redirecting her gaze to the route where she anticipated the elderly lady would emerge. The girl's gaze brimmed with tears as she departed. Moments afterward, an elderly lady passed and neared her. She praised the shawl, and Anka's expression brightened with delight as she thought the elderly lady would deliver gems to her. Her grin was as broad as a youngster promised treats. The elderly lady grinned at her affectionately, clutching a crimson sack in her grasp as she commenced speaking. "Dear, I'm merely a destitute lady. I possess nothing to offer you, but I have a request. I'd be pleased if you could assist me in removing weeds from around my dwelling. Yesterday, I nearly trod on a serpent concealed in the dense foliage. If you could assist in clearing it, I'd be extremely thankful," she told Anka, whose grin vanished immediately. "Are you claiming you're impoverished and lack jewels to provide me?" Anka questioned the elderly lady, who affirmed and begged for her aid. Anka's expression promptly sombered as she started speaking. "You desire me to remove weeds around your dwelling?" she echoed, creasing her nose as if the term was filthy. "Oh, mother, my spine has ached for weeks. Even transporting this container to the brook was difficult. Perhaps you should request those robust village lads. They relish that sort of activity," she told the elderly lady, who inclined her head and assured it wouldn't be lengthy. "I'll provide you sustenance in return," the elderly lady told Anka, who was already denying, gesturing her hand as if repelling an insect. "Mother, I desire to assist, but I'm awaiting an important individual here. Moreover, the sunlight is overly intense. My complexion scorches readily," she told the elderly lady, whose grin diminished as she appeared deeply disheartened. She affirmed gradually and started departing. When the sack she clutched fell to the ground and a solitary gem tumbled from the bag, attracting Anka's notice, who hastened to aid the elderly lady. Anka proposed to assist the lady in weeding the foliage around her dwelling, but the elderly lady declined her aid as she proceeded to depart. Overwhelmed with immense avarice, Anka seized a large branch and struck the elderly lady on her skull. She observed with contentment as the elderly lady collapsed unconscious, grabbed her sack brimming with gems. Prior to anyone's appearance, she dashed to the brook to collect her garments, which were piled by the riverbank. Anka didn't glance backward. Upon arriving at their yard, she had already practiced her falsehood. "I also have received a blessing," she proclaimed boisterously, her tone echoing like a village announcer. "In the identical manner Amara obtained her gems, the elderly lady has blessed me too," she stated as kids halted their games, females stopped, and males widened their eyes in thrill, all gazes shifting to Anka as she unsealed the sack, allowing several gleaming stones to reflect the sunlight. Exclamations permeated the air as all wished for similar good fortunes to find them. But unbeknownst to anyone, Anka's alleged blessing had been taken forcibly, and a malediction much worse than her indolence now pursued her closely. That evening, Anka retired, embracing the pilfered sack of gems as if it were an infant. She grinned inwardly, contemplating all the elegant gowns and footwear she would purchase merely to envy Amara. But amid the profound quiet of the night, as moonlight infiltrated her chamber, an odd occurrence started. The sack vanished, and Anka emitted a horrifying shriek. She awoke grasping her abdomen, her flesh scorching as if cast into a blazing oven. She tumbled on her mattress, flailing and screaming in agony. Her vision sensed as though boiling liquid had been dripped into them. Then gems started cascading from her eyes, large, radiant, exquisite gems, identical to those she had pilfered. Nonetheless, before her fingers could contact them, they evaporated. Anka attempted to halt her weeping, clenching her lips firmly, but when she restrained her tears, the scorching in her form escalated. It resembled an unseen blaze caressing her flesh, compelling her to cry more intensely. The greater her sobs, the more gems cascaded from her eyes and vanished, and Anka was ensnared in a harsh retribution, eternally scorching and never possessing the riches she craved. By noon, the entire village had congregated outside her shelter, peering through the openings as they murmured to each other in dread. Anka, incapable of enduring the torment longer, admitted everything she had done. All gaped in fright as they hastened to the wilderness to hunt for the elderly lady who was absent. Her fellow spouse, Amara, remained silently amid the group as she disapproved. She couldn't fathom the extremes Anka would pursue merely to demonstrate something to her. Nonetheless, what she understood was that idle hands and an avaricious soul never evaded retribution. The villagers convened as they escorted Anka from the dwelling and discussed her fate. She was not solely a robber. She had also attempted to murder an elderly lady whose sole offense was seeking aid. Though the lady remained unfound, the villagers resolved to penalize her for her misdeed. Certain villagers proposed she be pelted with stones to death for the severe crime she perpetrated. But Amara intervened and opposed their proposal, stating the elderly lady was never located, indicating she could still exist elsewhere. Thus, Anka ought to receive punishment instead. Most concurred with her, and they commanded Anka to launder the garments of every